Hi and welcome back to PJ Maybe. Today we're going to do a review of Them. 1954 monster flick. The classic. The original. This was one of the first giant monster movies out, and there's been a lot of imitations that have never lived up to the hype of this one. It was just so well done. The basics is, after the early atomic tests in New Mexico, a lot of giant ants mutated into man-eaters and threatened civilization. It was made in 1954, roughly about the same time as the first Japanese Ghidorah was produced, and similar messaging about the atom bomb and what devastation it could cause. It starred James Whitmore as Sergeant Ben Peterson. Edmund Gwenn is Dr. Harold Medford. Joan Weldon is his daughter, Dr. Patricia Medford, and James Arness as Robert Graham. The only other one it stood out to me from all the other cast members was the little girl at the beginning. Sandy Descher, she played the Ellinson girl. She was very good, but we'll get onto that later on. In effect, the story is, in the New Mexico desert, Ben, the police sergeant, and his partner find a child wandering the desert, and then they soon discover her camper van, which her mum and dad are, I don't know if it's just her brother and her, or a couple of more kids, were staying. It's ripped apart, and she's the only one that survived. They soon try and track it down. They go to a store and they find the store owner. Same again, the store's ripped apart, but they find the store owner dead, and he's been beaten, crushed, poisoned, and they don't know what caused it. So Sergeant Peterson leaves his partner there so he can go and speak to the girl to get some idea of what's happening. And while his partner stays there waiting for forensics to come out, he hears a noise. He goes outside and suddenly he hears shots and then a scream, and that is it. It's quite creepy the way they start it. They start it quite slow. You don't know what's happening. All you do is you know the girl, the family disappears, the store owner's killed, and now the police officer gets attacked by something. When they're investigating the family, the wee girl's family, her dad is an FBI agent, and so they send an FBI agent to help with the investigation. And once they find out what's happening, they get the support from the two doctors, Dr. Harold Medford and his daughter Patricia, or Pat. They find in the middle of the desert a giant ant colony, which has caused the deaths because you see them clearing out the bodies. So you see the skull, you see the police officer's gun and badge and other skeletons there, so you know the family's dead. To make sure there's no panic, they don't tell the general public. They keep it secret. But with the help of the two doctors, they manage to destroy the colony. However, when they're investigating the colony, they go into the colony with the gas mask after using cyanide to destroy all the ants. They find 2 husks, so they think 2 queen ants have escaped and gone out to start a new colony. So throughout their investigations, try to find where these 2 ants could have flown to. They see a report from someone who got knocked out of the sky in his plane by 3 flying saucers the shape of ants. So he's been locked up in a mental institution. So they go and speak to him, and he gives them an idea where they saw the ants. But to keep the panic down, they make sure he gets kept in so he sounds crazy. So they don't want him out as if he's a sane man telling the truth. Then they find the ant colonies. The first one is on a ship, and when I was growing up, this one terrified me, this one. And this is one of the scenes that I remember of the radio operator sending a Morse code message as the ant crashes through and grabs him and drags him out while his crewmen are fighting him and getting dragged and killed. It's quite a powerful scene, this one, but in effect it's just the start. The giant ants in this are not the greatest by today's standard, but at the time they were state of the art animatronic large ants, so it was quite well done for its time. But moving forward, the Navy get involved. They find 2 survivors and then destroy the ship because there's no way they could go in and find it to see if there's anybody else alive. So they destroy the ship and kill one of the colonists, but they still can't find the other. Eventually they find another dead man. Same idea, poison, but he's had his arm ripped off in his car and he had his 2 sons with him. So they try and track down where he was with his sons to see if his sons have been killed as well or if they're missing. And it turns out they find him in Los Angeles, and the part they used is the same part where the Terminator and Grease was filmed. Is it a viaduct in Los Angeles? They use for a lot of those things, but this is obviously early on, so it's probably one of the first time, and it looks a lot dirtier nowadays with the Terminator and all that. You see it's not used the same, so it looks a lot cleaner, but back then it looked grubby. And that's where the ants are. They're using the viaduct, the large tunnels, to go underground, so they're in the sewer system. So what they do is they let the general public know, so they break the secret, call in the army, and so the military police, the sergeant, the FBI and 2 doctors enter via the viaduct into the underground sewer system to try and find the 2 kids and to try and find and destroy the last ant colony before yet again more queens hatch and fly out, because they reckon that if it keeps happening, eventually human race will cease to be the predominant race on the earth. The storyline of them is very good. It is the best big bug movie. It is about a horde of giant ants and humans having to destroy them before they get out of control. There's been a lot of clones of this movie and none of them have lived up to that hype. There's been spiders, tarantulas. I remember the giant spider one, and it was just silly because it was a B movie. This one, although it was made as a B movie, Warner Brothers put a lot of money into it and the acting was great, so it didn't have that B movie vibe. It definitely looked like it was a very seriously thought out movie. Yes, it's about giant ants, but the way the actors portrayed it, it didn't seem forced. They portrayed it as an honest reaction to giant ants. It's based on the fact is atomic testing happened 9 years prior to in New Mexico, and throughout the 9 years it's caused the mutation in the ants to grow such a large size, and because it's a deserted location, nobody's ever came across them until recently when they found a kid. So the premise is this: these 4 people have to stop it. This movie is not only a horror movie, it makes the point of the time of the dangers of atomic testing. Much like the Japanese Godzilla ones, they find nothing good in radiation testing and the atomic bomb. There is even a monologue at the end of the movie explaining how things have changed now we have entered the atomic age. Obviously 70 years on, the feelings are different to an extent, but this was right at the beginning of the atomic age after testing and the Second World War. Nowadays, the feeling of how mutate things, you look at a lot of comic books, the same idea that how people got their powers, the radioactive spider for Spider-Man and such like, the Hulk with gamma radiation. So this trope has been used throughout fandom, geekdom I suppose it is, of how radiation causes mutations. And this is obviously very early on, and they used the giant ants. The four main leads, James Whitmore, James Arness, Joan Weldon and Edmund Gwenn, they all give a very good performance as the heroes who are out to save mankind, along with the US and the military and the police. The pacing of this movie is actually rather well done. It slows down when it needs to slow down to explain what's happening. So there's like the press conference, there's the talk to the generals, the admirals, the flight marshals or whatever, to explain things. But when it needs to be fast, like when the giant ants appear on screen, it speeds up quite considerably. The special effects for this movie is, by today's standard, very, very cheesy. But they were rather effective for the movie and are memorable for the 1954 when it was shot. This movie is filmed obviously in black and white, and it looks its best in black and white, I think, because it adds that haunting feeling to the desolation of the desert where the creatures were first found, and it makes the scenes darker. So like when they're going into the sewer system, it's dark and foreboding, and it's definitely a plus the way it was filmed. And I think if they tried to colorise it, it would ruin the feeling of it. And in all fairness, although it's in black and white, there is one aspect of it in colour, and that's the name Them. It pops out right at the beginning, and Them. On a lot of the early videos and releases, it was in black and white. Even Them was in black and white. But when they were re-releasing it, even early on in the cinema, they had Them in colour if it was rebroadcast. So they did add a wee bit of colour, but they only added it to the opening title of Them. And I suppose the Them was the only part I could see had a negative connotation, was the little girl when she came around, rather than saying something like "don't let them get me," she just shouted "them, them, them," and it just sort of take it out. I think something like "don't let them get me" would have been a better way of having the Them title, because even when you found out something scared her, she just called them Them. "Don't let them get me" would have been easier and a better way of introducing it, rather than her just waking up and shouting "them, them, them" while she's going to cower in the corner. Another one is, she's one of 3 kids that appear in this, and the 3 kids were really good. She looked traumatised. She definitely had the impression of someone traumatised. She just stared past people as they were talking to her. She didn't blink. She didn't like you would see a lot of kids do when they're meant to act a particular way. They sort of don't quite look right. She looked traumatised. Completely stared past, wide-eyed, very rarely blinking. And the 2 wee boys that were missing in the Los Angeles sewers, when they were found, spoilers, they're found. But a 70-year-old movie, if you don't expect spoilers, sorry, I can't help you. The 2 of them, one of them was scared stiff. He just stood there and stared, where his brother was shaking in tears. It almost was, he was so terrified and trying not to move to attract the attention, but he couldn't stop himself. So the 3 kids in it were very, very good in the way they did it. A lot of the extras were really good, like the sane asylum or the drunk tank, or even when they're interviewing people in general about if they saw something. You've got the woman that's just a off chance, sorry, I can't tell you where I was, but it was a married man, so I don't want to give names. It was just very offhand. It's the type of thing you would expect people to say and do, so they didn't actually have very set pieces of this needs to be said for the story. That there's things that happen that lead nowhere, and it's good because the way the story brings it in is even nowhere parts of the story are still parts of the investigation, because not everything leads you to where it's going. Like for instance, when they're first looking for where the Queen Ants are, they've got the Army and the Navy and the Air Force all working together and ask for anything that's unusual. So there's a board saying UFOs and stuff like that, so they're looking for everything. It just seems quite unusual. and they're passing it up, but even they don't know, they're just speculating. And the fact that they're speculating and they don't know is quite good, because you would expect that of people who were asked to give information that sounded weird, and they're speculating about what it's all about. So even the storytelling and the direction of the movie, even the parts you think are just wee offhand comments, are actually quite good, because it gives you the true life feeling of how people would act in that situation. Another good part of this fast moving story is there is no really a love interest. In all the early movies you always had someone falling in love and the love interest was going to do it, although you can see a wee teeny bit of the FBI agent sort of falling for the doctor, the Pat. She plays it, I'm a doctor, end of story, get out of it. So there is a caring part of it, but there is no love interest, which is a nice change of pace for it. And with a good cast and the soundtrack and the photography, it is just a pleasant watch. It's something I would definitely recommend. The good thing is as well is a lot of the weaponry used was Second World War weaponry. The flamethrowers, for instance, are Second World War and originals, so they were used during the war, and the actors they got to actually use the flamethrowers were veteran Second World War operators of the flamethrowers. So although they're actors now, they did have that. So they obviously brought people in who did have the experience to use it, so they didn't have to have stunt doubles and such like. They had people who were extras who were actual experienced in using the equipment, and they were actors as well, so you didn't feel as if they were out of place. When it moves into the underground, you get Sergeant Peterson going in to save the kids, and he gets attacked. You don't know if he's dead, you don't know if he's just severely injured. They sort of leave it, to me it leaves it as if he dies, but you don't know. And that's a good way of leaving a story, because not everyone survives, but not everyone dies as well. And it's a case of, did he die? Didn't he? Is it something that's really important? The fact is, they destroy the ant colony is the important aspect of it. And unlike a lot of ones nowadays, they destroy the ant colony. They didn't suddenly pan off to the side and there was an ant scurrying away, or there was another ant getting away. And it was a movie. End of story. Not something that they were looking at extending to another part or a second movie, like they would do now, which to me tied the movie up into a nice ending, whereas you didn't suddenly have all the heroes surviving and the two who had the love interest suddenly clutching each other and kissing each other because they survived. It didn't end that way. It ended with the colony being destroyed, and that's how it finished. It finished with the flamethrowers destroying the colony. So to me, the movie was a very tight, well constructed story, and considering the ludicrous premise of it, giant ants, how silly, at the time it was taken and filmed, although as a B movie, as a very serious B movie, as in how would people act if this actually happened. And every one of the actors, the extras, everything played it very well. You can imagine these people in real life if this situation occurred. So to me, it is an excellent movie. And this movie gets some extras. Not a lot of extras. So you get selected outtakes. So you get some outtakes of parts of the story you hadn't seen, but it's basically parts of the story how they've, right, bring the ant out this way, no, didn't work, bring it out that way, no, it didn't work, right, bring it out that way, so that's the one more thing. So you get some outtakes like that. You obviously get a still gallery, and you get the trailer. And the good thing is about the menu, the interactive menu, it makes it look like a newspaper report. So it's not just a case of trailer, outtakes, it was not a list, it was literally newspaper, giant ants, do this, and then there's certain parts you could select from it. And I think that makes this slightly more fun of a DVD than some I've got. Some have got great interactive menus, but this one is one of the best. The way it's designed certainly makes it stand out. So if you want to see a good classic monster movie, Them is for you. 1954, Giant Ants, the mother of all monster movies. People have tried to copy this and failed miserably. Some people have got close to it, but never quite the same. It's like the giant monster movies from Japan. Some people have tried to capture the Godzilla type movies, and they never have, because the original Godzilla movie was just a classic, or a Gideon movie was such a classic. If you like what you see, please leave a comment, press that like button, and subscribe. I'm on YouTube, Odyssey, and Minds, but I'll leave links in the description. I'm on Twitter. Please subscribe, follow, and remember, I'm not old, I'm classic. PJ maybe,